right, Coach. Hey, thanks for joining me today on this SimpleCoach interview. Really do appreciate you taking the time. College of Wooster has caused me nightmares for the last 30 years.
I'm intrigued to hear this, but first, thanks again for having me. It's exciting to be able to, again, as we shared earlier, talk soccer, talk leadership, and just being an advocate for student athletes. So this is a great opportunity, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, and trust me, you'll understand. So my sophomore year, we traveled to the wonderful, beautiful campus of the College of Wooster to play Wooster in a regular season game. At the time, the best Division III player, and by a long shot, I mean, seriously, by a long shot, and probably goes down as one of the best, I think, of all Division III soccer, was a guy named Ian Banda.
Yep.
And he as a goalkeeper, to say he took advantage of me is an understatement. I made a magnificent play on a corner kick where I came out and I punched the ball away from danger, as I'd been taught so many times. And Mr. Banda, from about 35 yards out, took a touch and hit a laser that just went over my fingertips and under the bar. And we lost. Just and it has been a thing of nightmares since then.
I'm sorry, that's on your highlight reel. That's special player, special person for sure. Pretty unique time for Worcester soccer there.
Yeah. Paul McGinley, I actually reached out down at Trinity. Yeah,
yep.
Great coach.
He's awesome. He was one of the first people that reached out to me when I was fortunate enough to get the job here. So great coach, great leader. He's awesome.
Yeah. And then as a side note, that same game, out of pure frustration, I take responsibility. I got into a fight with your baseball team that I think still plays, right, or trains or practices.
It's right next door.
Next door.
Practice.
They were heckling me like.
I can totally see it happening right now.
Yeah. They were totally heckling me, like getting on my nerves. And I halftime blew, and I marched right over there. I was like, I'm going to beat these guys. And even though they were carrying baseball bats, I was convinced I was going to take them all out. Yeah, I had to get held back. It was hysterical. Anyhow.
That's awesome. That's great.
All right, so you know what? That was kind of therapeutic for me.
Exercise those demons, yeah, for sure.
Now let's talk about you. So, because this is not about me. You've been at Wooster since 2014?
Yeah.
2014?
I got to do the math here. I don't know. COVID, it's like a time warp. I don't know where it is.
Yeah. I'm totally thrown by dates.
Started like spring of 14, then first season was fall of 15. Would that be 15 to 15? I think 15 to fall.
Yeah. Okay. How did you end up at Wooster? What's your journey been like? And how'd you get to where you are today?
For sure. So NCAC guy through and through. I am from Cincinnati and grew up down there playing for a pretty competitive club team. And then as we went through the process, got to a place where high academics and playing immediately was very important, and so was looking at high academic institutions, D1 and D3, and found a home at Denison. And my sister went there, and that was part of the attraction, but also just a great school. And at the time, Coach Russo and Coach Mike Caravana were taking care of the program, and it was the right fit, and it was fantastic. And initially went to Denison to go to medical school, and my sister's a doctor. I'm like, that's what you do, this is the next step. And was a bio major and got to my junior year. I took the MCATs, and I was like, what are you doing? This is not what I want to do, So I kind of pivoted to education and was, fortunate enough that Denison was able to work with me and create some things. I graduated with my class, and then Coach Russo was like, you got a student teach, why don't you come back and be a grad assistant? They don't have graduate programs, but through student teaching, I was doing that, and then was the assistant at Denison, and then from there just kind of took off. So that started in, I think, 2005, And while I was the assistant there, I was also teaching high school science at a place called Licking Valley, which is east of Newark, and it's, if you've ever heard of the Longer Burger Basket, I mean, it's literally a building built like a basket, so just around there. And so worked for Rob there, and then taught high school science, and was, we lived in between, so was flying back and forth between Denison and the high school, and then got to a place where I started to get a little restless, and it was time for a new leadership challenge and change. And as a family, we had started, my wife Kelly and I, and then we had one son at the time, but we're looking for places we valued the culture and felt like it would be a good fit for a family, and looked at some schools, and then blessed enough to get the head job at Wooster, and it felt like the right fit, and it's been a really good community and a good place to be a part of since then.
Yeah, Worcester's a neat place. Like the college and the town, like it's unique.
It is very unique, and I think a lot of people, I think about like the recruiting process, like what the heck is Worcester? And I'm like, well, if we can get you here, it's a unique little town, and it's great. It's very green. It's beautiful. I think we're spoiled in a lot of ways, so it's been a good place. From a professional standpoint, but then from a family standpoint, it's been a great place to raise a family too.
So let me ask you, since your days of playing, by the way, Denison is another fantastic place. Like your pedigree, you
Coach
could
doing great things there. It's a great place for sure.
In that time, even from your playing days, have you noticed any changes in players? Have they gotten better, more responsible?
That's an interesting comment. I think they've gotten better. I think we are producing better soccer players now. Maybe that's just me, but I think about some of the players that are currently playing high-level D3 soccer, and I'm like, I was never at that place. I didn't feel like, And then the other piece of it, you talk about, like, responsibility and things like that, and I think, you get what you expect. And so as we go through the recruiting process and we try to filter, like, if we expect and create high standards through that process, that's what we're going to filter out and get. So for me, I don't know. I don't think that's changed too much. And, when our guys get here, there's a learning curve for everybody, but I think we're getting high quality individuals that are, aspire to do great things. And so I don't think that's changed. I think that's global and universal, but I think it's the environment that's going to help get that out, But I think on the visual side, I think players are far more clean and have higher IQs and are more technical.
Yeah. And I would say College of Wooster isn't like from an academic standpoint, it's got some high standards. So you're recruiting some kids who already have I think, and I noticed this a lot with different coaches, like you're recruiting kids that have a certain level of discipline, like personal discipline. I got to work hard because that's what I do, and so you're the beneficiary of that, I think.
I hope so, and that's again through that filtering process. Are you taking AP classes, IB classes, and you're willing to be a little uncomfortable, and then as we get into the the soccer piece and the training piece, there's a recognition there that we can push them a little different way because they're going to respond to the adversity. At least that's the hope.
I actually, on the other side, a friend of mine actually went to College of Wooster and played ball there, Ben Falcone. Same time period that I was there. So, I mean, aside from guys who are comfortable academically, not comfortable, but who are intellectually curious from an academic standpoint, what are the types of players that you gravitate to as a former soccer player yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I think to back into it, we grew up in a very, you work your tail off, end of story. Like I don't care how you play, but if you're not working hard, that's a problem. I remember games I'd come off and my dad would be like, "What'd you think?" And I'd be like, "I thought I played really well." And he's like, "Yeah, but you didn't work very hard." And so that became part of my fabric and DNA. So when I'm out watching, I'm really looking for individuals like that are competitors, that are hungry. And again, sometimes that's hard to see. And I laugh sometimes. The pamphlets get handed out, and parents or coaches are like, "What are you looking for?" And I'm like, I really want competitors. Individuals that want to get better. And in an ideal world, it'd be nice to watch like 3-on-3 or. I don't know if you remember like Gus Macker or Hoop It Up, like just watch kids compete and how they respond, because in those environments you can't hide. Whereas in a soccer game, there can be long moments where the individual you're watching might not, be exposed to the ball or be in a confrontational situation. So that's the first thing, is individuals with a high work rate that are hungry. And, again, we watch the games, but then try to filter that out through the dialogue and the recruitment and relationship process, if that makes sense. So that's number one. And the other part is, we want individuals that are high character, that, again, want to get better, but understand how to treat other people in a relational. So as we're going, again, vetting, are they responding to a text? Do they want to get on the phone? That, to me, speaks volumes to them. And same thing when we're watching them play or watching them train, how are they? Are they high-fiving? Are they communicating with their teammates and their coaches? Do they clean up the bench afterwards? We had one individual we didn't get, but I went to watch him. I didn't need to watch him more, but after the game, he was the only one that cleaned stuff up, and that's all we talked about. I was already convinced he could play for us, but the mentality was super important. So those things are kind of that intangible piece. And then from a soccer playing standpoint, we want good players. I mean, I know it's a very blanket statement, but individuals that want to take risks and play on the front foot, that do want to connect passes, but also understand we need to get forward and have an element of verticality and directness with our dribble, with our passing, with our penetration, with our runs, things like that. And then I guess the last piece, kind of looking at that hard work piece as well. How do guys defend? If you're, when you turn it over, are you willing to do that quick explosion to recover or track back? Things like that. And if they do, then that, again, speaks volumes to what they're probably willing to do, not just academically, but as a teammate, as an individual on campus, and things like that.
I would think that type of player does wonders for your program from a cultural standpoint. If you're able to, if that's a type of player, even if you're only hitting 8 out of 10 of the guys you bring in a class that fit that mold, it's got to be culturally, it's got to be
and that's I appreciate you bringing that up, and that's
impactful.
One thing is a program. So when I came in, Worcester was not in a great place competitively, and it was in a worse place culturally than I had anticipated, which is what it is. And so everybody's like, you need better players, and like, of course you do. I don't care if you're the Cleveland Browns or the Cincinnati Bengals or the Buckeyes. If it's hard, if you can have a great culture, but at the end of the day, you still need some players that can play for you and be productive and produce. And so the thing we really focused on was our culture. And so that first year I came in, that group helped kind of create the fabric and DNA of Worcester soccer in the day-to-day, not just, the 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., but like, how are we going to act when we're in the dorms, when we're in the dining hall, things like that. And so kind of the 4-tiered approach to that culturally, which now the guys, they thrive in, they love it, is that hard work piece. They love to work hard, and I think it's paid dividends for us academically. We do quite well. I joke we have a bunch of nerds, but we have a bunch of guys that sit in the front row that want to do the right things and whatnot. At least that's what we joke about.
They're nerds. You could say it. They're nerds.
They're nerds. So, and they embrace that. And I think that hard work is carried over to understanding I need to work hard at relationships. I need to work hard at, the day-to-day. And so that's been big value for us. And then the other part is it's very much a family-first atmosphere. My wife and I, when we, really invest in this, we live a mile and a half from campus, and it's pretty much an open-door policy. And so we want guys that want to be part of that as well, that this isn't just soccer. This is bigger than soccer. And, for us, it's a lifetime, and it could give you a zillion anecdotes, but I'll give you 2. We try to have the guys over, again, pretty consistently. And so one of our seniors that graduated the COVID spring, his family gave us a table so that, and it has leaves in it, so we can extend when the team comes over. So, we're in it together, and it's pretty special. And then the other one of our guys already got engaged, and he called my wife before he called me. So, it's yeah, right. Like, thanks, Ben. So,
it's like, I'm not sure we might want to cut this part out.
So, but it gives you that idea from a cultural standpoint that guys are looked after and feel like they're a part of something bigger. And I think that's gained a lot of traction for us, in the day-to-day, but in the, now when they step in the locker room, there's an element of care that they're like, I'm going to work for this guy because he cares about me, not just as a player, but as a person. So those 2 things have been foundational. And then the other 2 that the group came up with, and these morph a little bit here and there. We have a little 1% in our locker room. It's, I don't know, maybe 6 inches high. And we talk a lot about, like, get a little bit better today, and be the best version of yourself. And that could be as simple as opening the door for somebody else, is making your bed, is, just one foot in front of the other. And so we have a lot of dialogue. It's not just like, hey, you need to get better, but like, let's sit down and talk about what you're doing well, not just soccer, but academically, socially, and then what we can improve upon. So we try to give them ownership of that. And the last one is we talk a lot about leadership, and we want all of our student athletes to lead, whether it's a first year or our captains. And our first years before they got looped in with the full group this year, we got them on a Zoom call, and we're asking, what are your leadership abilities? And we get a lot of blank stares. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Like I'm a first year.
They've never been asked that question, right? They've never been asked. Legitimately, they've never been asked that question.
And so from there, we're planting seeds of like, you're going to have a leadership role. It might not be as big as somebody else, but you're going to lead. You know, you're going to have to take a responsibility. That way, the hope is, as they mature and go through the program, when they get to be juniors and seniors, that it's just clockwork and they're leading from the front, leading from the back, and elevating other people. So those pieces culturally have kind of driven us, and that's, you know, what we recruit to. So I appreciate you know, commenting on if we get that type of player, that will foster, you know, growth within the program.
Can you go a little bit more into? I'm assuming you have some sort of leadership group, team leadership group. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of tiered, and we have a leadership council, probably not too dissimilar to some other programs, regardless of sport. But we try to have representation from each class. So we currently have, I think, 7. You throw fifth years in there, it's all wonky now. But we're trying to have voices and experiences and different lenses to bring to the table when we're trying to make decisions as a group and communicate about the team. So we have that, and then in the fall we'll vote for some first years incoming players to be on that too, and then we'll meet probably once a week, maybe once every other week. You know, the chaos of the season, we want to be mindful of their time and respectful of that. But we have that, and then we also do we have captains. We vote on captains, and I feel like every year I'm like, what do these other coaches do? Do they vote? Do the coach pick them? And I don't know there's a right answer. It's so unique, and COVID threw a wrinkle into things and whatnot. So we have that, and then we include them with our coaching staff and allow them to be a part of those conversations. And then the last one we do is we have a peer first year mentorship program where each incoming first year student athlete gets paired with a upperclassman that they've connected with. And so it's a bit organic. It's not like, here's your binder, go sit down, ask these questions in the Lowry Center. You know, that seems forced, but we have it where they're investing consistently about how you getting settled, what are you doing academically, you know, how are things going socially, how you doing soccer-wise. You know, you probably went from starting playing a lot to now not doing that as much. How are you managing that and handling that and things like that. So that's kind of the tiered piece of it. Some of the other subtle things that we do, we read a book every summer as a group, and we, you know, one of the blessings of COVID has been able to have conversations like this. I don't know why I didn't before. Like, why don't we get together every couple of weeks just to say hi and have a little banter? And so that allows for some discussion there in preseason. And it's just a constant day-to-day thing. You know, we're talking about it. It's something that they are aware of, and that they're, you know, to start every training session, we ask them, you know, what are you thankful for today? How'd you elevate other people? And we get everything from I aced my test today to I had my favorite meal at the Lowry Center to I helped this individual with this test. So it's something that's part of their day-to-day dialogue. It's visible for them. So it's not just we're going to talk about it once and be done. It's consistent and conscientious.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said, especially just looking at programs in general. There's a lot to be said about the culture, and then also probably equally as important is that, to me, that leadership, that level of leadership that sits below the coach, right? Coach could lead, but if nobody's following or nobody's sort of bought into it all, you're year by year, right? One year you're going to be good, next year you're going to be bad, right? And it's just so.
And that's hard. It's I don't know, you know this as a leader, a former player, like this isn't rocket science, but it's very hard to do. Like,
don't get me wrong. I talk like it's easy. It is not.
No, I'm not saying it, but like, I mean, our guys like, hey, just keep showing up, you know, and keep trying to get better, and that's hard. I mean, I think about it as a parent, like, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, you know, how do I do this? And it's a challenge.
You're almost looking for the finish line, and there's no real finish line. You just you keep going, right? Like
you're hatching with you at all times. You're never out of the woods. That's right.
Yeah. You know, that'll take. They don't realize it. They might not realize it now, but that'll carry with them, right? What they learn now and how sort of the things they figure out now are definitely going to carry them in years to come, and when this stuff gets real, right? Like when real life gets real, like that's where it's going to really pay dividends for them. Hey, how long do you think it took you to shape Wooster in the way that you want the program to be, or at least to be headed in that direction where you're like, you know what, this is indelibly my train?
Sure. I think probably 4 years, is that my first class I'm forever grateful for. I mean, they're great individuals, and I think believed in me before I believed in myself. I mean, I'm never done this before, as a head coach, obviously had ideas as an assistant and, great experiences, but it's like we joked about parenting, like, you're never ready, like, I'm ready to have kids. Like, well, yeah, you're
no.
And I, when I first started, I was like, no means thought it was going to be like easy, like smooth sailing, but it's a challenge. I think just navigating and working with, 30 plus 18 to 22-year-olds and trying to change their mindsets and get them valuing, here's what we want to value and whatnot was a challenge. And so I would say 4 years in that first class bought in and from the get-go, and they were leaders as first years and sophomores, and that was probably not the best thing for them and their growth, but I didn't feel we had an option given where we were going. So, that year when they were seniors, I mean, we had a very, very special year in a variety of ways and didn't quite reach our goals, but I think they, really left their footprint in a special legacy that's rooted in, the competitive part, but more so the relationships and the day-to-day, and this is what Worcester soccer looks like. And so now I feel like we're in a healthy place where it's, consistently the players are driving a lot of things and understand what the expectations and standards are. And not to say we don't have hiccups. Like I said, COVID, I didn't foresee some things happening, and so we've had to kind of reboot and make sure, okay, we got to make sure we really focus on this, which we hadn't been focusing on as much prior to.
There's if you don't not comfortable with answering this, you don't have to. But you mentioned earlier that when you were brought on, Worcester wasn't necessarily in the best of places from I guess the program. I mean, could you touch on that? I mean, it sounds like you were brought in with some serious responsibility to.
Sure. Yeah. So when I was playing, Worcester was fantastic. I think they would have been in the tournament now, just the way the berths have changed. Right. They would have for sure been in it. But they were top of the conference. I think had the two best forwards, I would argue, in the region, a guy named Adam Milligan and Brian Conaway. I mean, they were dynamic. They were great. And then when they graduated, the program gradually declined. Why that is, that's neither here nor there and whatnot. And I think it got to a place where, the student athletes weren't engaged, didn't seem connected as much, didn't have an invested value in the program. And even in improving, I felt like, when we started to do some things in the spring, it was, what do you mean, coach? And I'm like, you don't want to get better, and so that took some time to again, find those individuals that were hungry, that said, okay, I'm here for academics, but this is also an important part of my experience, and creating standards of that. So, but it's hard, coaching's hard, winning's hard, leading's hard. And so I don't, it is what it is, and we've moved forward, and it's been okay.
Yeah. No, I get that. I just, and it's true. You don't know. Sometimes there's no rationale for it, right? Like it just, you go from 1 year and then you just have a streak of it just, and you haven't necessarily done anything different or what have you.
Right.
Always.
Yeah, just
that's
like,
the sort of thing
I'm. Put my finger on this. What is transpiring? What's happening?
Yeah. And then before you know it, 2 years have gone, and you're like, 3-4, right? Three for 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, something else you talked about is just that COVID year. Like, how was that for you? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Wow. Was it fun? Were you the only person on the planet that really enjoyed it? Like,
no, that's a loaded question. I think higher ed in general, it was a very difficult place to be, whether it was at a College of Wooster or big school X, Y, and Z or small school. I think it was a difficult time for educators, for leaders, for faculty, staff, and then for the students in general. This is not any experience that anybody wants and wishes to have, and I think each institution managed it the best as they could given the information they had. And it's always hindsight, like, why didn't we do this? Well, we didn't know, and so I think in the moment it was a great learning experience for me as a leader and our program. And I think we tried to make, like everybody's probably going to say, is like really tried to make the most of what it was. And so, there's times I look back, I'm like, why were we training outside like this? Like things that, and it's, you learn. And now, if we had to do it again, we meaning the college or just society, I think we would do things a little bit differently. But you don't know what you don't know, and you learn by experience. It's no different, from starting year one to now, would do things completely differently to start. But overall, it was, at times I thought, I was like, this is going to break me, but I think it was unique in that at times I was carrying the players and at times they were carrying me, if that makes sense, I'm not sure this isn't what I signed up for, and they didn't either, but, there's times where we're not at our best and we need somebody to elevate us, and that's where I think we worked well through our culture because of that. And so I'm very thankful, that we got to a place in the spring. Well, we started training and then it increased, and every school did it a little bit differently. And we had a place, I think we wrapped up early. It was right before Thanksgiving or something like that. And so we went home, and then the college made some great decisions to help us out to get to that point, and then to support activities coming back in the spring. And that's where I think it was really fun. If it sounds weird, this is something I'm very thankful that the college did, but the NCAA did as well. It was kind of like carte blanche, February 1, like obviously we're testing, but it was, we were able to use almost every day, and we didn't train every day, but we got to be together every day. And I think for the student athletes, that's what they need. For students in general, don't even, remove athlete from that. Needed a space to have community and be together. And I thought we did that really well and had a lot of fun with that. And started doing some unique storytelling where our players had platforms to talk about their story and where they're from. And I don't mean like I'm from Cincinnati, but I mean like, what does that look like? How'd you grow up and what experiences can you share? So it allowed us to be a bit more vulnerable and do some things that we might not have normally done on a normal year. We've done some of it, but it really allowed us to have a focus on each other and some development in some different ways. And then we got to play. So it was great. And, I think our guys in the moment would say, oh my gosh, that was one of the worst experiences ever. But I think in reflecting, able to say like, that was okay. We navigated that all right and helped out and did some things on campus. And, we're advocates for the student body population and having a good experience as well. So, we try to do things as a family. We would like bring them food on occasion, put it in styrofoam boxes. We'd cook stuff and bring it to them because they weren't, able to get in dining halls, or had like a ice cream truck one day where we, met them outside and, acted like the ice cream truck and had stuff for them to enjoy. But then the soccer part was great. I mean, we really competed at a high level and had good results in that moment. And it was fun.
Well, first of all, the community part, we've been just watching at the local high schools, and the time period where where everyone was online and there was no contact was probably the worst stretch, I thought, right? And I just thought it was just so important for kids, especially kids, right? Just to be student athletes, students, colleges, like just to be around other like individuals, right? And I thought that's super important.
And I'm trying to think, like that summer we did some things where like we get on and play like Pictionary on a Zoom call where they had to draw, again, just anything to network and connect and be with each other and try to, give them platforms where they're not just isolated, and I think that was something we tried to do. I think you'd have to ask them if it went well, but I think overall we made the most of a crummy situation. Yeah,
well, that's it, right? Like, it's, you got lemons. What are you going to do? You can either bemoan that they're lemons or you make lemonade, right? So, by the way, some of these questions sparked, I got to give a shout out to one of your players, Jack Gilliff.
Jack Gilliff, yeah, he's awesome. A lot of fun. He is going to be a fifth year for us next year. He's going to come back and use his eligibility. He's from DC, but awesome young man. He's very cool.
I watched this as I was thinking about you and I watched the Scott talk he did.
Yep.
I'm marking him down as a competitor. Like, he's not bad.
No, absolutely. He gets that. Yeah.
All right, so let me ask. I don't know how much. I got to believe every coach experiences it, right? Where a lot of recruits are thinking about Division I and like D1 or bust is what we were talking about, and probably the last 4, 5 coaches I've asked about your thoughts this idea that it's Division 1 or it's nothing. Do you have any experience of that in your recruiting world, or?
Yes and no. So it's such a hard one, right? And I'm gonna back into this two ways. So again, growing up, like I was like, I think, why am I not getting all these kids on these good teams emailing me? And I'm like, you didn't do that, Andy. You were emailing the coaches that, like the programs that Division 1s you aspired to be at. And I remember this conversation my dad had with me on the back porch, and we had guys, on our club team looking at IU, looking at Kentucky, Harvard, like big time schools, big time programs, South Carolina. And he goes, Andy, I'm sorry, they're not calling. That's not you. These are the types of schools that are interested. I'm not saying you have to go to those schools, but that's where you need to focus your recruitment process. Is the types of schools that fit you athletically, but then academically, where that are strong schools. So that was a pretty humbling experience, and as competitors, we're always bullheaded and stubborn and things like that, and we can always get it done. But that was a good check, because like I can still have a great experience even if it's not at IU, Maryland, Ohio State, UCLA, whatever it is. So the other part of that is it's not my experience, and even though I think Wooster is beautiful, it's great, other D3 schools are awesome, that might not be what they want. And I've had to like take a step back and say, like, that's okay, but try to give them the information to make an educated decision. Like, just so you know, like, here's what we can offer you. I don't know what other schools are telling you, but you need to be comfortable with whatever outcome you're going to get, and say, okay, I might be sitting for 2 or 3 years. Like, that's fine if that's what you want, And so that's one thing I've learned. It's not about me and my experience, but about them and helping them get to a place where they're comfortable with the decision that they're making in the process. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I'd say it's D1 or bust. I do think we get caught. I think a lot of Division 3 schools, high academic, are caught in that. We're really good schools and we're really good programs that could compete at a high level across all divisions, but it lacks that. I got to play D1 soccer, and that's a hard one. If that makes sense. And so that to each his own. But I don't say I think I see that. I think I get frustrated when I see individuals that I think would be a better D3 fit than a D1 fit over here, or even a D2 fit at times. But that's how it goes, and wish them well and try to figure things out, if that makes sense.
It actually does. Like you're what we talked about before we actually started the interview of, I hate to say it, being hands off. I try to tell Mike, like, it's their decision where they're gonna, and you succeed or you don't. That's you. All right. I could sit there and tell you what I think, but ultimately it's your call, and I think that's what ends up. There's a lot of cases, right? Like, sure. I think kids have to learn. Hate to say it, like the hard way. I've seen tons of players be like, "I'm going D1," and I'm like, "Good luck with that," because I don't. Same thing, right? You're like, I think I could name 15 other schools that would give you the 10 times better experience, but if that's not where your head's at, I can't tell you otherwise.
And I think the other thing we talk about, like it's when recruits come in or families come in, I don't talk a lot about soccer unless they ask about it. It's more, here's who we are as a program. Here's I have a sheet that we talk about our culture, and I say, like, the reality is your hourglass is ticking. Like, there's a reason you're sitting with me, and it's because you're not going to. Not that you can't play USL or things like that, but like, you're probably not going to play in the MLS, if that makes sense. And so, we have that conversation, and the end part is, like, you need to do you have to have your microscope and look, what do I want now in these next 4 or 5 years, but also what institution is going to set you up big picture. What is it that you want? Is it, and again, there's no wrong answer. It's what's best for that individual and that family, but trying to give them the information to make those decisions, and look at schools like Wooster where that's not the right fit, and look at these schools over here.
Yeah. I always say too, like, if you think you're going to be at that level, at that highest level, if you haven't heard from anybody by the time you're even a sophomore, including you haven't been called up to a national team, or you're not playing on an academy or MLS, whatever they're called now, that likelihood is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah, right. This is a sad reality.
What types of schools are recruiting you? If it's Big Ten, ACC, then those are the schools you should be looking at, or that type of school. If it's high-end D3, D1, then that's probably where the focus should be. And that's hard, I think, again, going back to that initial comment, we all want to play at the highest level possible, but it's what is the entire experience, the entire package going to look like? And I think, as a D3 student athlete, I think it's fantastic. I think there's a lot of resources we have at institutions like a Wooster or NCAC schools, OAC schools, UA, like all across the board. There's great schools and great programs and experiences.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. So, look, I'm sure you're familiar with the overtime change.
Yeah, sure.
I'll just leave it that way. Do you have your thoughts on that? Are you in favor?
I don't know. So there's two parts of me. The competitor in me is like, there's got to be a winner, right? Like,
yeah.
like, I don't know. Nobody likes a draw. But as when I was looking over the questions you had sent, I was thinking about the experiences our program has had in the last few years, and I'm like, wow, a tie against that team sounds really, really good. As opposed to a loss. So like the fall before COVID, like went to Calvin, lost 2-1 in OT. Played Brandon up a case. I think they were Elite 8 or Sweet 16 year 4, lost 2-1 in OT. This year, John Carroll 2-1 in OT. And I'm like, people see that and like he still lost. And I'm like, so now like selfishly, I'd be like, that would look really like you tied those teams and so that's attractive. I think as you look at player protection, it makes sense. Like all D3 coaches manage this. Like, oh my gosh, the volume of games we're playing in a short amount of time is difficult, and so opportunities to reduce that load are going to be important. And it's not it's later nights, it's travel, it's a lot of different things. So I think when I submitted my response to the survey, either way, we'll manage it either way. But I think it's an all right thing for sure. Yeah.
Do you think that is gonna? I mean, you raised up 3 games, right, where you lost in OT against top quality teams. Do you think that would change the way you approach coaching a game against those guys? Like knowing you got 15 minutes left on the clock instead of whatever, 45 left on the clock.
I think so. Absolutely. I even think, especially when you get into conference play where like, the points matter and
matter. Yeah.
Those really matter as opposed. Okay, so I don't know. What's the mindset? Are we gonna play a bit more conservative now that we know there's 10 minutes left on the clock and a draw is a good point at this stage? Or okay, a draw's not gonna be good enough. We gotta go. And so I do think it'll be unique to see how coaches manages that and whatnot and personnel use. And the other one, which you didn't mention, was the no re-entry in the second half too.
That's it.
Will we get to that? I don't really know, but same thing as that was processing. I'm like, okay, we got to change what we play. We got to get more players. We got to be fitter. We got to or we're gonna have players that are not getting as much time as they potentially could to spell and develop. And so there's a lot cased in there from a competitive and student athlete experience that has to be teased out. But I think either way, coaches are going to have to navigate and manage those new nuances and rule changes.
Yeah. I like you said, a result against Calvin at Calvin. A 1-1 result. Yeah, I can live with that.
Sure.
And
I was even after the game. I was like, didn't know I knew good. Coach Sauter's phenomenal coach, phenomenal person. But this was our group we brought in. Like we had. Coach did a dumb job, brutal non-conference schedule, and but I wouldn't have changed it. It was so fun to be in that environment and like learning experience for our guys. Like we're there, we can do this. Consistency has been an issue for us, but on our day, it's fun to be at that competitive level. So,
let me ask you. It sounds like you turn a lot of responsibility. And it goes into the leadership conversation to your players. Mm-hmm. Do you have any, knowing that's like you expect them to be certain way, right? And they expect to be leaders on the field and in the classroom. Do you have any other or sort of what I call non-negotiables for the players?
Yeah, sure. So we'll start with, like how they treat other individuals. I feel like it's become a pretty well-respected program on campus, and I think that's because we develop relationships across campus. We don't want them, this sounds weird, we want them to have an entire experience. This isn't just academics and soccer. It's be involved in clubs, be engaged, be leaders in other parts of the campus community. And so I think that has allowed them to kind of take up more leadership responsibility. We don't force that, but I think as we have dialogue as a program, they recognize like I can do it all. I can and still have a nap and still go work out and hang out with my friends. There's a lot of that in there. I think from an academic standpoint, like I joked earlier, we sit in the front row, but like we have regulations and stipulations. If you don't go to class and I find out, there's a major consequence. And that's just class. And I'm as a nerd, like you just go. This is like go to class. Sorry, I'm getting like frustrated. This is difficult to do, right? And so we have a lot of conversations about that. But I think it's more like the expectation is you hold yourself to a high standard and you are consistent in those actions and your habits. I think as I've matured as a coach, one of the things I've really tried to emphasize to our players is the importance of consistently having positive habits that are going to put you in a situation to succeed. Those are going to be different for each person, but I think if they can hold themselves to high standards, they're going to perform at a higher level. And I've found that people like that, whether you're a 6-year-old or a 30-year-old, having high standards and positive habits is going to help you succeed in the day-to-day. And again, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have off days, but can that be the consistent programming piece of your day-to-day to put you in a good situation? So I would say that's more of the non-negotiable than like, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, if that makes sense.
I so as a player, right, I always remind myself, like, I never liked rules. Like, the rules were not my thing, but let me be my way, and as long as I'm following that and I'm doing what is expected to me as the person of the program, then that to me is sort of how I lead, and that's how I would show, right? And I think a lot of players end up being that way. I haven't seen many coaches that have like, I've had a couple like, here are my 20 demands, you're going to show up, you're going to wear these sneakers,
And I think they value that. They understand that this is the standard of the program, and I need to act and perform. And it's not just soccer, right? It's all the pieces to be at this level. This idea of like never-ending ascension. You mentioned, we're not out of the woods, or you're not done. You're not a finished product. We've got to keep pushing yourself and trying to be better. And I think that lends itself to them taking ownership of their growth. And when they do make mistakes, right, we all do, and they're 18 and 22-year-olds, and they're figuring things out and learning and growing, like, I would say 90+% of the time I'm the first to know. And that, to me, is important, that they have enough value and respect for me and what we do as a coaching staff and as a program to say, Coach, I made a mistake. Okay, let's figure out why. How do we improve it academically, socially, whatever it is, athletically, and let's move on.
Yeah. All right. Just from I've been asking this to everyone because again, you mentioned the calendar and like the fall that you're navigating 18 games or however many games you end up playing and the difficulty of that. And so from a coaching perspective, how do you prepare your team for the next opponent?
Sure.
If you do, right? Which is fine too, right? Like if you bother, like at some point you're going to be like, we're just who we are and we're just whoever's in front of us.
So it's so once, we want, and I'm sure this is again every program, we've got to come in prepared and fit. We've got to be like, have we played as much as we wanted to this summer? That might not happen because of internships, jobs, lack of opportunities, things like that. But at a minimum, can we control our fitness? Because it's not like the winter and the spring sports. And it's unique. I think every season has a different advantage, right? But they get to be here, they get settled, they can have a non-traditional season before their season. Ours is almost flipped, right? Like we have a non-traditional, but okay, now you got 12 weeks, 12, 13, 14 weeks till you come in again. So I think that is a baseline is super important. And so that I think prevents injuries once we come in a good place, and we'll know day one. But then I think it's lather, rinse, repeat. I mean, as soon as game starts, it's I'm thinking we play doubleheader on the weekend. Dumb coach did that, but like, how are we going to get our games? And we're only at 17. We don't have the full 18. So, so I think some of that is we literally will put like minutes restrictions on guys and be very mindful of the load on their body and recognize like, short-term gain, long-term benefit, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen here, but this will be better for you in the immediate, and then long-term it's going to help us out as well. So it's the both and. So, but, I haven't quite gotten your question yet, but, we'll play that, and then we'll play again the next Wednesday or Thursday, and then we play Saturday. So it's, pre-game, light day, game day, recovery day, game day. It's really difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
So I think how we prepare for that two ways. I think the first one, here's our principles of play. Here's our, standards we expect from you when we're competing, and we work towards those, but then a full recognition of, okay, we're playing back-to-backs or 2 games in 3 days, 2 games in 4 days. We need to we like to press a lot, so drop our line of confrontation and be mindful of that, and, press in the right moments. We're still pressing, but we're not pressing at the 18 consistently to conserve energy. And I think the other part is then making sure everybody's aware, like, you need to be ready. That's a lot of the preparation, the mental piece, and making sure those individuals that are, numbers 15 to through that down the line are prepared, because you're going to have to give some minutes. You're going to have to, whether it's small minutes here, but also large minutes there. I think that's important. And then the opponent itself, let's say we're playing Team X, can we get film that early, or is it, can we digest what we just did and say, okay, here's where our breakdowns were in terms of what we're trying to do well. How do we, rectify those things going into the next competition?
Yeah. So
it's hard. It's a juggle. I'm not sure the right answer, and I know each program has different challenges and resources they have available to themselves and things like that. But I would say we watch a fair amount of film on ourselves and try to do a pretty thorough scouting report on our opponents. And, we have a pregame report on paper and a PowerPoint and things like that. So, but as you were saying, it's hard. You want your players to have enough confidence in what we're doing that we're not completely changing. Like, coach doesn't think we can play our style and things like that. And, I think there's something to be able to play different ways in games and different types of games. I don't think there's very few teams that we play against that have to change their system for other people, if that makes sense. I would say most teams are managing, okay, they do this really well. Just look at our conference, Kenyon Ohio Wesleyan, I think they're a benchmark and they do things really well. I don't think they get changed too much, and they don't need to, and that's okay. If we go toe to toe with some of those better teams, that's a challenge, and it's let's look at Liverpool, who I follow. I don't, good or bad, I don't know, but for Real Madrid,
it's bad, but that's okay.
I think Champions League final for Real Madrid opens up. I think Liverpool wins that game, no question. But because they don't want to give space behind, they change the way they play, and they're world-class players. And I think that's the other part is, like, I don't think there's a perfect way to play soccer. I think there's multiple ways, and there's this what's effective versus what's attractive. And it's hard to find that balance, and our players want ownership, and we try to give them that, and then communicate, we're doing this really well, or, okay, we need to fix this piece of our game. And so it's hard, but I think at the end of the day, being adaptable within the game, but also going into each game is super important, and preparing for that.
I think if you had a week, if you had consistently a week between games, maybe I think working in ways to better adapt to who you're playing, you could probably do. But when you got 2 days, I sit there and like, it is impossible.
Like, I think this year we have 2 week-to-weeks. I think one, Allegheny left the conference, they went to the PAC, so we're down to 8 teams in the 8 competitions, 9 teams in the NCAC. So because of that, there's a bye week in there, and then I think everybody has a Saturday to Saturday. So we have 2 this year, which will be nice to deep breath, gather ourselves, what's going on.
Recover, right? Physically, if it's later in the season, right? Just you got some time to rest, right? So with everything that was going on, COVID and all this stuff, and you come back to campus, you finally get to play in the fall. Like, did you have any sort of expectations, or were you just sort of happy to be like, hey, we're back to normal?
Sure. I think it's a little bit of both. I think credit to every college coach, every sport in the country, like in the moment, leading and coaching, and then responding and having a new normal. We'll say that. I think, we're going to continue as institutions to pivot and navigate things as go, but hopefully we continue to provide those opportunities for all sports, all levels, all seasons. And so that's a credit to anybody that's been involved in higher ed, because it's been exhausting. It's taken its toll, and I don't think anybody's really had a chance to take a deep breath and take their foot off the gas. And I think we're managing that now. I mean, this year was more normal, but I think, I got to have a normal job, but I'm exhausted, right? I mean, this has been a long time coming for everybody, and not just coaches, but, so credit to academia for making those things happen. So I think for us, it was twofold. Like, it really put in perspective, like, this is a game, this should be fun. A colleague of mine, he high level Division I, and he always starts things like, if you enjoy your soccer, you're gonna have a lot more fun. And I think that goes for anything you do, whether it's, you work in corporate America, whether you're whatever it is, if you're enjoying what you're doing, your product and your performance will be higher. And so I think that's one thing I've really taken is like, this needs to be fun, and it should be, right? It's a game, but I think you get wrapped up in, got to win, oh my goodness, we got Wabash, this is a game, this could be a conference, like top four decider, things like that. But like putting in perspective, like we have one of our guys, he's like, Coach, I get to play soccer with my friends. And like, it's such a good lens to look at things through. And I say it a lot to our guys, and it's a good reminder that, we get to coach soccer and lead individuals to become better people. And that's a pretty good perspective. And again, we all get lost in it, and our identity gets wrapped up sometimes in the wins and losses. But I think if you boil down to what we are blessed enough to do, it's to be a part of the game we love, coach it, sometimes play it, smack some balls around in practice, but be in the locker room, be in that competitive environment, and help these individuals become better people. So I think that's one thing that really, I knew, but I think COVID really kind of re-emphasized and kind of laser focused. And then to the competitive piece, our as a program, our goal has been, can we consistently be in the top four and be in contention for the top four? So that hasn't changed. That'll continue to be the thing. So I think that was our, I don't know, expectation, not the right word, but that was the goal last year, the program goal, and we fell a little short, and that's nobody's fault but our own, and so I think that'll be pretty consistent with this upcoming season, and that's okay. We're acting our age and where we were to where we're going. I think you look at Kenyon, if they bring everybody back, they're a Final Four team. I mean, they were that good. I thought. I can't say that to our guys. We'd have to, right? Like, can we put ourselves in a situation to win the conference? And that's the first goal for us, and that'll be what it is coming in this fall, I think.
Yeah. That game Kenyon lost to Messiah is the best game I think I watched all year. Just from a technical, tactical, all of those, it was outstanding. And I'm still amazed. I'm amazed that they lost. I'm amazed at how quickly Messiah was able to do what they needed to do to get the goal, get the winning goal. It's the remarkable.
I hate soccer day, right? Like, it's such a fickle game. It's such a love-hate relationship, and it's very unique. So I think the other part is, like, can we reach our potential, right? And what that looks like is going to be, I do think that puts us in a very competitive day in, day out situation. And I think that's maybe the most important thing. Can we reach our potential, and to do that, and that's going to happen through consistency of our habits and our culture and, competitive excellence. Maybe that's the bigger goal that then results in these other things happening. If we can be day to day, be thankful and have a, cliched attitude of gratitude that we get to play and compete with our friends. But then can we, focus on, let's be consistent with high performance and be high achievers in those moments. And I think that will put us in a situation to reach the tangible scoreboard goals for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. To me, I think a lot of teams that I watched, like, it's the competitive consistency. And I'm not talking about soccer. It's stepping out in the field and having, like, I got an axe to grind here, and I want to win, and I want to compete. And again, the soccer will take care of itself, and it's gonna. But I think that's true. There is a level, like, if you could just get competitive day in and day out consistently, the soccer takes care of itself, and you'd see you're on the better side of the scoreboard than not, right? But again, easy for me to say. Getting there is like, it's a task. It's hard to do. Otherwise, everybody would be super good and they would be super competitive, right? That's the reality of it.
And that's the fun part of it, though. I think we embrace that, and that goes back to when you asked about recruiting. Like, we want individuals that understand who we are and want to be a part of that and be a part of that process. It's going to be a great experience. You're going to work your tail off. You're going to become the best version of yourself and reach those high standards of competitiveness of the day to day and you'll do better academically, you'll do better socially, and those are the important pieces too.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you to give an overview of the North Coast Atlantic Conference, the NCAC. That,
Sure.
And I just sort of looked at your schedule, and I had forgotten how much of a bear of a conference it is. It is not. It's not for the faint of heart, right? Like Kenyon DePaul, Wittenberg, Ohio Wesleyan, Wabash, Denison, which I think is going to be, obviously, your alma mater, going to be a force to reckon with. And they won it last year. They're beating Kenyon. Another remarkable game in its own right. But maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's I love it. It's fun. I mean, obviously it brings us frustrations when you're very close and not quite there. But we tell our guys, like, we get to play against guys that could be at a higher level. We get to play against teams that are some of the best in the country that would compete at a very good Division I level. Like, I know it's hard, but I'd rather do that than in another conference. That goes back to, like, again, the culture we develop. Like, you might not win as many games, but you're playing against high level competition week in, week out.
You're not being shy.
You gotta keep showing up. And there's that consistency piece again. So, for me, it's very fun. It's weird to say I've been a part of it since I was 18. So, like, started in 2000, and here we are 22 years later, and have been fortunate enough to be around the coaches and some of the with Brandon, myself, former student athletes that are now coaching. And it's pretty fun, so but it's very good. It's very good. I do think there's I do again think Kenyon and Ohio Wesleyan are a benchmark, and then it is a dogfight from teams 3 through 6 and 7 depending on the season. I think last year, going into the last game, 4 teams were vying for the 4th place spot. And it's crazy. I mean, we always have our coaches meetings, and we're like, can we get 6 teams? I think when I first started, I would argue it was a top 2 or 3 conference in the country. We had 5 teams in the national tournament, and maybe could have more. And so I think everybody wants those opportunities, right? Like, we can do it. We can be there. And so so it's good, and there's good coaches and good players all around. I mean, there's a wealth of talent in Ohio and in the Midwest, and a lot of the schools are drawing from other areas because of their national draw, and so it makes for a competitive environment for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, even out of you don't have.
No, I mean, you look at, there's just so many liberal arts schools in the area. There's like OAC, it's a phenomenal conference. Yeah. Like, okay, let's go get beat up over there, So
it's remarkable. I mean, you got a heck of a conference, or a heck of a schedule. I mean, even just going to, I mean, you're at home against John Carroll is going to be vengeance, right? On grass, they're a turf team.
We'll see.
That's a turf team. Come on now.
It's fun. That's so. Yeah.
Get the baseball team out there. I'm telling you.
Bats out there. Let's go. All the help we can get, for sure.
Just in terms of the fall here, I mean, you've talked a lot about the fall and sort of where you think, like, what do you have any sort of early thoughts on as compared to this past fall? Do you think you're going to be better? Obviously.
It's going to be interesting. So I made a comment earlier about, I probably should have foreseen, but it's always hindsight. Like, COVID, we had 5 fifth years come back, so credit to those guys, wanted to have their opportunity, and then 7, traditional seniors. So we graduated 12, which of course I knew was coming, but the void it had left from a leadership experience standpoint was not what I expected. I talk about, like, from the get-go, servant leadership and growing leaders, but I think we had a lot of individuals that missed some of those opportunities because not it was taken care of for them, but it was happening, if that makes sense. And so once the 5 left at the semester, and then the 7 obviously finished out the year, but there was this kind of, okay, who's leading now? How do we navigate some of these things that we haven't had to really have our imprint on? And so we've been very intentional about that. So I think that's going to be a growing pain for us. But I also think the other part of it is the experience we've gained in the last 2 years, I think, has put us in a really good situation to recognize, okay, these are the pitfalls we've had that really aren't soccer related. It's more mentality and consistency related, and controlling what we can, and the life of a D3 athlete in any sport. Sometimes you're flying by the seat of your pants. You're bringing your gear to the lab or whatever to get to the bus. And so really, okay, how can we manage some of those outside things and control what we can to make sure we're, stepping on the field and, okay, let's take care of business.
Yeah.
So we're going to be competitive. Where that takes us, I don't know. I think our aspiration is to, reach our potential. If we do that, I think we can put ourselves in a good situation to be in the top 4 and then, go from there.
Then it's game by game.
Right.
That's the beauty of it. If you get into that spot, it's game by game after that, and anything goes.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think anybody expected. I mean this respectfully. Anybody expected Denison to beat Kenyon in the final? Like I think I would hands down. I was like,
why you play the game?
Yeah.
And our guys are like, Coach, we just tied them.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I know, and you missed a penalty. Like, it's where it goes. We were good enough. But that goes it's great. It's awesome, and but it's why you show up. You got to show up every day.
Yeah. That's it. Put on your shorts and get out there. Tie them up and go. You mind if we talk a little bit about recruiting?
Sure, absolutely.
Shift over.
Eat, sleep, and breathe that. Oh my God.
Yeah. Actually, 2 things that just reminds me. First thing is when you talked about COVID, I forget who mentioned it. Like during their time at COVID, because you've joked like, oh, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
Like you didn't sign up to be a therapist, a psychologist, all these different, right? And that's summarized the experience, I think, for just about every coach.
And it's funny you say didn't sign up. Like, I didn't sign up for it, but I did sign up for it, right? Like, what a great experience. I mean, like, I don't mean that in the most, like, I learned a lot from the experience, right? Like, COVID, great experience. No, I mean more so, like, got to grow as an individual and as a leader and be a part of a really unique time in our history and a unique time of these individuals' lives to hopefully make a positive impression. The other part that's funny, I think sometimes people look at coaches like, you show up at 4:00, you leave at 7, and I'm like, no, that's not exactly what it looks like. And there's days where I try to like prioritize our daily dashboard and check up and whatnot. Right. Like, okay, I got to get practice done first, do this, and then all of a sudden it's 2:00, and I'm like, we haven't had a chance to even talk about soccer yet, And so as you're saying, like, I'm a head soccer coach, but there's like a list of these other things that sometimes need to take precedence and just do. That's part of it's like running a little business, if that makes sense. There's a lot to manage there. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was just going to say is that when you talk about recruiting and about it's you eat, breathe, sleep it. Another coach told me they're ideally that a head coach concentrates 80% of their time on recruiting, which never happens, right? Sure. Like you can't, because you got, like you said, you got all these other things that you're trying to deal with. But they said in an ideal world, the head coach spends 80% of their time on recruiting. And I thought, the successful ones. And I was like, that is probably very true. If you could just say you're just responsible for making your team better and you forgot everything else, like where would you put your money? It would be on the recruiting side because that's your funnel. But I just thought that was interesting. All right. You familiar with those websites, the NSCA? Do you use those as part of your recruiting practice, or?
Yes and no. So we use them in the sense that, like, individuals will reach out through it, and sometimes the company itself sends a blast of this interest. This individual checks the boxes that match with Wooster and things like that. And so I think it's a good resource to get started. I think COVID has made it more valuable in a lot of ways. I think we didn't get to watch as many individuals as we wanted to, and so that provided a really good avenue to make connections, to network with individuals and programs through that, and to see them in a different way. But for us, I'll be honest, I love to watch individuals in person, and I love when individuals would reach out and respond personally, if that makes sense. And so I'd rather see somebody, they might be a part of one of those organizations, but they're saying, hey, coach, I'm interested in Wooster, and here's why, as opposed to just a blanket mass email that goes to a lot of coaches, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, it is hard, right? Because students and families need a platform to be recruited and whatnot, and we we can't be everywhere. I mean, this past weekend, you talked about where your Suns were at, so there's stuff there. There's East Regionals, South Regionals, Midwest Regionals. MLS Next was this weekend. The ECNL out in San Diego. Like, there's so many factors besides the fact that I physically can't be everywhere, but budget wise, it's just not in everybody's budget to do that. And so trying to utilize all resources to say, okay, how can we find players that one we see, but also that are clearly interested in the College of Wooster through a networking database to develop that relationship.
Yeah, I don't know. I get them because my sons, right? Like, hey, sign up. And I'm always just, again, a curiosity thing. Like, is it worth?
Yeah. And like I said, I would rather see, I don't know, let's use your son, for example. Like, I'm interested in X, Y, and Z school. Like, just email them. That to me speaks volumes to them. And maybe that's that character culture piece. We want individuals that want to be here. And so sometimes it's a two-way street. Like, we go watch and we recruit and bring in, and other times I know Worcester, I know about it, I'm interested, and so then we go that avenue as well. So but to me that is, I would rather see that than the other way around.
All right, speaking of all the places that you should be at but you can't be at because there's there's one of you, is the showcase tournaments. What are your thoughts on those? Are they valuable to you in your recruiting process? Do you like going to them, or?
Yeah, so so I'll give a shout out to our assistant Mike Lambeck. He just started this past March for our spring season. He's a Wittenberg guy, so we don't hold that against him. And I know, right?
I'm not getting in the middle of that one. That's you guys' deal.
He's a great resource. So between the two of us, we try to do quite a stretch our budget and our resources as much as possible. So I do like them, but at the same time, I love, not that all games don't matter, but when there's like, this is for something, right? You get to see, I think, a little bit different level of competitiveness. I think the other part is no different than what we talked about. Like, 3 games in 3 days is a lot. What level of play are we actually seeing? It's, if you asked a college team to play 3 games in 3 days, like, we spent halftime of the second game. That can sometimes be frustrating. Like, and can you find the guys that are really buzzing and flying on day 3?
Yeah.
Late in day 2 and things like that. So there's pluses and minuses to it, but I think it's a good opportunity for college coaches to be exposed to student athletes and vice versa, for individuals to get on the sideline. In an ideal world, it would be, I don't know, catch a game on a Saturday and go see another game on a Saturday. But that's we're sitting watching a half, 30 minutes to a half of one game, and then turn around, watch the other game. Okay, and, those games are over. Let's migrate to the next field. Things like that. So it's can be and from a player's, they want to be seen, they want to be watched, and the reality is it's hard to sit for 90 minutes and watch a game, or 80 minutes depending on what it is, if that makes sense.
The last tournament where I saw a big presence of college coaches was the ECNL in Virginia.
It was one of the better,
and it was like shifting sands of coaches. Like, you could just see, like, 35 minutes in, okay, they've seen enough. They sort of shift over, and you see these guys, and then it would stop for a little bit, and then it would resume.
So our previous assistant, who had been with me since kind of the start, awesome young man, got engaged, got married, and lifestyle changed, time to move on from Worcester. But he'd done the ECNL events, and I hadn't been able to, and this is the first one I went to with our assistant Mike, and it was professional, high quality. As you're saying, like, it's not a go. Like, we watched 45 minutes, move to the next field, but I didn't feel like I was like running 1,000 miles an hour the way it was organized, and it was a really good event. So credit to them for what they're doing and how they're structuring it. It was positive.
I enjoyed it. It was fun, and seeing all the coaches, like, that was the first time. It was really. And for my son, right, it was like, Dad, did you see so-and-so? Did you see so-and-so? And it's like, I couldn't tell who was who after a while because there were so many on the sidelines. That's pretty cool. But how important do our ID camps? I think I saw that you have ID camps.
We do, yeah. So I love them in the sense that whether it's ours or someone's I get to work with, I think it's very, again, relational. I've said that word a few times. Like, I get to connect. I get to hang out with the individuals. It might be, sounds silly, but at the dining hall, if it's an overnight or something like that, or as we're walking to training, and just get to know them a little bit more and have a little bit of banter, that when you go watch a an ECNL event, like I'm not sitting there hanging out afterwards. I'm going to the next game. It might be if I know the individual, a quick fist bump or hey, good luck, and off we go once their game's over. But in those environments, you get to have that relational piece, and then you really get to watch them train and compete. I think those habits are important. We talk about, I tell our oldest son, he's 11, like, this is the coach in me, like, you need to have good training habits. And he goes, Dad, I just
He's like,
but like looking for those things, and are they dialed in? Are they engaged? And you get to see that and what that looks like. So I think for me, they're very valuable. And they can be intimate, whether it's ours or going somewhere else. I think it provides a unique opportunity to have that. But then also, if you're interested in X, Y, or Z school, to probably meet some of the players and get in the locker room and have that authentic piece at that institution that the school, that the student athlete and family is looking at. So ours is great. I love it. It's intimate. It's usually smaller, just kind of the way we run it and who we're reaching out to. And we have like a leadership session in the middle where we listen to the kids talk about leadership and their strengths and what leadership challenges and struggles they've had. And so we sandwich that with two kind of playing pieces on either end. So so it's a fun day. Long story short, I like them. We do tell individuals, if you can't make it, I'm not crossing you off my list. It's not like, oh, you can't come. Like,
No.
try to tell them if we really need to see them. But also recognize, like, there's conflicts, there's vacation, and there's life. So.
Yeah. All right, last question, and then I'll let you get on with your day. You go out and recruit and do all the things that are not soccer related. You could do. The high school coaches the high school players that you recruit, like, what do you tell them is their gap between what they are as a player now and what they have to learn to become a successful college athlete, right? Like, because they haven't experienced college, so I got to believe that there is some level of a gap.
Right.
Their ability, whatever that might be.
Sure. No, I think that's a great comment, because you want to have individuals you can have a dialogue with to say, hey, you do this really well, but if you come here or play at the next level, you still need to improve on X, Y, and Z. And I think that's where you find the quality, right? The individuals that are like, okay, I'm listening, I'm hearing that. And even, let's say, I talked to you on today, and we talked about these things, and then you play your next game, and then you're like, hey, coach, did you see a change? Like, oh my gosh, how valuable would that be to have somebody you're recruiting sit here and turn around and say, I try to implement what you talked about. And so that's just more of a blanket statement that individuals that are wired like that want that feedback, are going to find success when they move on, if that makes sense. Whether it's athletically, whether it's academically, I mean, that's a sweet spot for them. And so for us, I think a lot of it is, and this, you've watched enough soccer and competed at a high level, it's so much, like, it's such a intense and unique environment, and the speed of play and the overall, I guess, just intensity is so much higher. I think, our guys joke, like, Coach, I'm so old, and I'm sure you've heard that. I'm like, I don't want to hear that. You're 18 to 22. But, again, if they had to play like they did when they were younger, the emotional toll and the physical toll that's every day, like, they are spent after a game. Like, Coach, I can't do a whole lot more right now. And I think that's a larger change that student athletes need to be aware of, just that overall mindset shift. And the other part is, I'll come back to soccer in a second, is making sure they understand the rigor of being a college athlete, what that looks like. This isn't just, high school, depending on how much effort you put in the school itself, that's going to make it difficult, but it's a learning curve for everybody, and it can be pretty steep sometimes. So making sure they understand what the rigor is of the institution and then of the program itself. So we try to have those realistic conversations about those two pieces. And then, when individuals come in and we recruit, one of the first messages we give them is, here's what we saw that we really liked. And actually we question them, would you like feedback on your play? Is the question. And a lot, when they respond, then we're going to say, hey, here's what you're doing well, and here's something we saw you can improve upon. So, and do they take that to heart? I don't know. I'm sure they want to hear the praise, but if you're serious about it and want to get better, you're going to listen. Here's a professional. I don't know why I put that in quotes, but somebody that this is what they do is giving me feedback, and hopefully they take that into account. So, that's I think you've got to be careful with the messaging, and also you want them to have a good experience, whether they end up at Wooster or school X, Y, and Z, that they're better because of the conversation and interactions they've had with me or our assistant and things like that.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm the professional. You're not the professional, right? Like, you could drop the quotes. I put that in quotes. Yeah, that's me. Yeah. That's interesting that you ask them, right? You ask them, do they want to hear what you have to say? And I use that with my sons, that when, especially, they know now, like when they have a bad game or I think they have a bad game, I was like, do you really want me to tell you what I think about how you played? Because I don't want to just clobber them. My question is, have you ever gotten somebody to say, yeah, well, I'm not really interested in what you had to say?
Not so openly like that, but I'm sure we have individuals that have said, yeah, this isn't for me. I've even had a dad email and say, like, thanks for providing feedback. Like, not everybody does that. And it's hard to do, right? Like, it's difficult to manage and navigate. So, like, we don't do it perfectly, but if they ask for it, we're going to try to give it to them, And so it takes some intentionality and things like that. Yeah. So I'm laughing about your sons. Same with mine. We sit in the car and I'm like, my favorite thing to do is watch our kids compete, as you mentioned earlier. Like, hands down. And so I'm like, I loved it. And then we'll sit in the car and talk for a little bit. I'm like, do you want some feedback? And sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. And
no, they know.
Shut your mouth, coach.
We have this thing about, like, I grew up playing, and the coaches I had a Scottish guy. It was like he knew nothing else but brutal honesty.
Right.
Like, I'm going to be as brutally honest about how I think it, because that's the only way a player gets better.
Yeah.
And so my kids know. Like, they know the term. When I say, like, do you really want me to tell you what I think? They know it's not coming from, like, this, I'm going to sugarcoat it. Right. I'm going to try to give you, and, like, if you're asking me, I'm going to tell you as a soccer player, as a soccer coach, and all that stuff. And sometimes it's well received. Other times it's like, Dad, I don't need to hear it. I'm like, okay.
It's, no different with our players. And as I've matured and grown as a coach, like, my ability to be direct has gotten so much better. And I think they value that so much more, when we sit in the locker room or at practice or in the office or wherever, like, they want to know, because they want to be on the field. Is it like, coach, just tell me what's going on, and I think that's helped me mature a bit. And, they know what we expect, but sometimes they're not sure they're performing at that level. So to be able to relay that to them. And so going back to the recruit question, to be able to tell, and I think everybody's doing this, can that individual fit into our program? And if we're recruiting them, the answer to that is hopefully a yes, but there's going to be improvement, And so I think about, we were fortunate, one of our young men was playing at Indy this weekend in regionals, and we're going to give him feedback on how he played. We have to, right? Like, here's what you did well, but to make an impact here's some more things you need to improve on.
Yeah. I think too, right? Like, the as sometimes as harsh as it can be, your touch was off, your runs were half-hearted, whatever it is, those things are, they never come from a position of malice. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that, especially players who are a little bit more sensitive about that thing. It doesn't, I don't tell my kids because I want to, like, clobber them and make them feel like dirt, like, because this is the game. Like, there are ways to be better.
Yeah, right.
And these are the things I see that are going to will take you to be better, right? If you do this, you're not going to be as good as if you did something else. And I always try to remind them that, and I think they've gotten it for the most part. But they know. When I ask, that's when they're like, maybe later. Maybe later. Tell me later when I'm in a better mood. Right, but because they know. I think intuitively they know. Yeah. So, anyhow. Coach, thank you for this. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. College of Wooster and all my, the years of therapy I've had to do with Ian Banda, who I actually played with in years later.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
Up in Agra, and he was such a class player. But anyhow, really do appreciate you taking the time, and wish you all the success, and you and your team, and I'll be following.
No, I appreciate it. Again, I appreciate what you're doing in the sense you're advocating for student athletes, and by doing this, but also for D3 soccer, which is what we do and what we love. So it's great to be here, and hopefully people that listen get something out of it, and continue to watch you and learn from you.
Well, thank you. Really do appreciate it. All right.
Sounds great. Keep kicking.
Yeah.
All right.